Hey guys, Jason Fuller here again with Excel Aviation, Chief CFI, out here to just give you more detailed information on why we shut down during these freezing cold temperatures. You see me here, I have to wear my thick coat. It's a cold one out there, and this piston engine right here, it also does not love that freezing cold temps. Yes, you can fly in these temps, but there are other things that you do modify, but also you risk a lot of things when you do that. So I just wanted to go through these things so you can understand why we shut down. Our temperature we normally use is about 20 degrees. It's just a good round number to keep the planes out of the air below 20 degrees. Now let's start out with the first and foremost, which is shock heating. We have in your lessons learned about shock cooling, hopefully in a descent. Very beginning, you should have been drilled in about shock cooling. But shock heating is a major concern out here when you're starting an engine in the cold, but also if you're doing things like go around. So basically you got this metal. Now I am in the heated hangar here, and it's about 40 degrees in this hangar. So it's not amazing, but it's not, I think we're at 6 degrees outside. So if this was sitting outside, you've got this metal down below freezing. And what do we know about metal, glass, anything like that? If you heat or cool it rapidly, it's gonna crack. So imagine this, you got this cylinder sitting out there at 6 degrees. And you do your priming, get your fuel, and you crank it over, and that fuel ignites. What's that first ignition gonna be? It's gonna be an explosion. It's an explosion of power, but also explosion of heat. So you're taking this aluminum and steel, and it's down at 6 degrees, and you put a 1,000-degree explosion in there, instant rapid acceleration on expansion and heat up, and a high probability of cracks. Now those are very dangerous. So starting these engines outside in the cold with no preheating is a massive no. Below 20, it's a guaranteed. You do not start these piston engines unless you have the metal preheated up. Now, of our aircraft that we have here, I've selected the Cherokee 140 to go over this, but it's gonna be all of them. Only our Piper Arrow currently has a block heater on it. Now, I actually have block heaters to install, but they're just oil pan heaters, and because they're a little messy, they tend to break off or fall apart in the summer. So they're kind of a nightmare to do. We don't get these temperatures very often, so I'm not a huge, we just normally don't deal with that, and we just don't fly them. If we have much prolonged periods of time, we may look into more possibility of doing things. So that's called shock heating on the startup. So if we had to fly, we could warm the engine up. I actually designed and made a little portable electric heater that had ductwork that would pump hot air about an hour to 2 hours before you would come out and put that on, and it'd get this engine nice and warm. Therefore, it makes the metal safe to start. Beyond that, you just have cold fuel. We don't ignite fuel, we ignite the fumes. And when the fuel's super cold, 6 degrees, it's not going to fume as well. So starting these is darn near impossible without a preheat. Okay, the other side of shock heating is gonna be, let's say you're flying and you power down. So we're an air-cooled engine, right? Air's coming up through the front, coming through your cylinders and cooling them down. Well, what keeps the metal hot? Power. As you power back, you're taking the explosion away, so the internal starts to cool off. So that's gonna allow this rapid air, 80, 90, 100 mile an hour air, what do you think that wind chill is, blowing across that, and it cools these down. As they cool down, then all of a sudden, let's take landings for example. Spam calls. Let's take landings for example. You're powered down, gliding, full idle, you touch down, okay? Or even a go around. During that whole time, you've got the power way low, and you got that 85, 90 mile an hour air coming in. The cylinders get extremely cold when it's 6 degrees outside or even colder. Then the first thing you do is, whoa, full power. So you go from no explosion to mass explosion, and guess again, you got that shock heat, you can cause cracks. Now, normally, it's not a catastrophic, it can be. You can cause one to boom, and a whole connecting rod will go. You can get a valve that snaps into, and it could be catastrophic full engine shutdown. Or the more common one is to crack in these pistons, you got your cylinders, you got your valves. In between is a very thin piece of metal, and that generally is what cracks. So then you drop compression. Generally, engine stays running, but at the next interval where we do our compression checks and everything, we're gonna have to throw $2,000 cylinders away and buy new ones, plus $1,000 have it installed. So you're talking minimum per cylinder, $3,000 worth of damage that quick. So no, we're not doing that. Hey, that's called the shock heating event. Then we have the shock cooling, which I treat as if it's always possible. In the summer, it's not so much possible. In these extreme colds, it is possible, kind of covered it. Cylinders get nice and hot. We're talking 300 degrees or more on the outside. Then all of a sudden you power down. If you power down too far, you take away all the explosion. You got that ice cold air rushing over it. What's the cylinders gonna do? They're gonna cool down very rapidly, and it's gonna shrink that metal too fast, it's gonna crack. Now, as you slow down for slow fly, as you power down, the airspeed comes down, the amount of air coming in is slowed down as well, so the cooling's not as rapid. It's the descent that's the massive problem. You're up there 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10,000 feet, and you got to come down. If you start just shutting the power down and putting the nose down, you're gonna put 140 mile an hour air across these with no internal heat. So you got 300 degrees, you take away the heat creation, you rush, what's the wind chill? 6 degrees or colder as you climb at 140 miles an hour. It's just gonna rapidly cool those, and you're gonna shock cool them. So the only way to come down in the winter in these type of temperatures is to leave the power up. You need 2,300 RPMs to make sure you keep that heat in, okay? Problem is the air is so cold and dense, your indicated airspeed, remember the high, thick, dense air, pushes hard on the airframe, pushes on it, gives us high airspeed. So now we're up in the yellow, and we can barely get to come down. So it's a long process of coming down to protect these. Now, the good news is, take 100 RPMs out, let the cylinder cool down. About a minute later, take another 100 RPMs out. So you can taper that and get the throttle back to very low without shock cooling, but you gotta do it in a slow progression. If you do that, you're kind of okay, but then you run into the other problem. Now you've got ice cold cylinders, and now you gotta level off or add power, and you gotta bring that power up. So again, we know, no full throttles. You come up very slow, bring that heat in slow. So we have to be very mindful of that. The third, there's 3 on the run engine side. The third one's your oil. So our oil runs through an oil cooler, and we'll come over here and look at it. As you should have been reminded in pre-flights on our checklist, the Cherokee 140s has the front oil cooler. Now, when we're talking about the Arrow, the Warrior, they do not have a cover, one you can cover and protect. But so in the summer, when it's hot, air flows through this cooler, and it's gonna cool, oil's flowing through it just like a radiator, and it's gonna cool your oil from overheating. Now, as it gets colder and colder, that oil doesn't have a chance to heat up because it's too cold. So we have a plate we put on it. You should have learned about pre-flight. Now that's gonna work to a certain extent. We'll go back over here. That works to a certain extent. The problem you run into is when it's that cold, again, these run colder, everything runs colder. Even with the oil cooler plate on, once you get below 20 degrees, your oil is not heating up. Okay, the design temp's 180. So oil, when it's cold and 6 degrees outside, you pull your oil out. Let's see if we do this. You're gonna notice it's like syrup. It's like molasses. It barely drips. And that's at 50 degrees. Imagine 6. It's just gonna be sludge. Okay? Now, when it's warm, it runs like water. Now, if we don't allow this oil to heat up in our engine, it's gonna be like sludge running through it, and it's not gonna lubricate this thing, and we're gonna cause some damage. Now, is it significant damage immediately? Not really. But when it's this cold and your oil barely clears 70, 80 degrees, it's not getting through all the tiny little passages through the crankshafts and your cylinder walls. Believe it or not, they're lubricated. Those pistons slide up and down. There is oil on those piston walls. When that oil cannot make it through those passages, when it can't push itself and liquidate everywhere, guess what you're gonna do? You're gonna cause scarring on your crankshaft bearings. Okay, you're gonna cause scarring on your cylinder. So now, if we do this prolonged period of time, and that could be a 3-hour cross country with the oil not coming up to anywhere near 180 degrees, you're gonna have major internal scarring on these cylinders. So once again, we pull it in. Oh, guess what? No compression. Every cylinder that's low on compression, $3,000, okay? Then we come up with a problem if it's on the crankshaft bearings or the piston rod end bearings. Now you got even a bigger problem because that's a full teardown. Now, how would I know those are going bad? Okay, once those get scarring, the engine starts to have oil pressure issues and oil temperature issues, because now when it gets warmer outside, that oil is pushing in, but the scarring creates bigger cavities, and oil actually then, when it's thin, pushes out rapidly and doesn't lubricate like it should, and creates high temps and also lower oil pressures. So we would see that damage in the summer. So that oil runs into a significant long-term catastrophic major repairs. All right, so that's the engine. That's the protection of the engine area, and why we shut down in this. Now let's talk about the cabin area. Up in the cabin, and that's you. Okay, I'm wearing a coat, I'm wearing boots. I'm not gonna go fly in this. So one of the biggest problems with winter flying, beyond anything else, is trying to stay warm in the cabin. We do have heat, but if you're in the cabin and you're in, like, there is no way I would fly in this. My boots aren't gonna work. My big, nice winter boots aren't gonna work on those pedals down there, working the brakes. Heck, they're too tall. Above the brake pedal, there's a bar. Hopefully you've been taught about that, because we've had people run off the runway. I'm hitting the brakes, and they're pushing the pedal above. Your toe cannot go above the top of the brake pedal. So if you have boots, they're not gonna fit. They're not gonna fit down there. So you're steering, you're braking, you can't do it. So in these cold temps, you cannot prepare for the cold temps as a pilot. This big old jacket, you get in there, you're gonna be bound up. It's gonna be harder to fly. Your hands are gonna go numb, so you're gonna be wearing gloves. The push to talk, everything becomes more and more the danger of something happening. Yeah, the base of flying up, down, left, right, that's simple, but what if it's rough? What if you hit the runway and it's a little slick and you're trying to work the brakes, and now you're all bulked up in a winter coat and gloves and a big old boots? You're gonna have major issues inside the aircraft. So we can't allow, you can't go flying in that. You need it for pre-flight, but you should always have, like, you notice we have a lot of the Spider quarter zips or things like that. You may have noticed a lot of your instructors are not gonna come in big and bulky. You cannot fly, and hopefully they're helping you realize you can't fly in that. You need it to always have something warm underneath, so you can pre-flight in the cold, but then you can throw it in the back, okay? And I always recommend bring it with you, because, we hope you never have an accident, but if for some reason something happens, you're in the field and it's cold out, you want to be able to grab that jacket and throw it on, but you don't fly with it. So to be able to not fly with that, we also need the cabin area to create heat. So we do have a heater. So I want to show you how that works. So come on in a little bit. Hopefully there's enough light. I want to show you. So the air is rushing in through the front, goes across the cylinders, and this is specific to almost every piston engine. The air is going to flow through this duct, this little 3-inch duct right here. It's going to go across your muffler. Now you should be able to see it, but right here, this is your muffler. The air goes across the muffler, just flows one right through, goes around it. There's a hose on the bottom that goes into the cabin. So that's why we're good. That's how our heat's going to work. It's just airflow through a tube, over a hot muffler, into the cabin. Okay? Sounds great. Works great. Gets you nice and hot. The problem becomes it doesn't sit in that muffler area. It just goes across the metal muffler. So, carbon dioxide poisoning, if you haven't got to that, cabin heat is a huge, huge issue, because it's your muffler. Any exhaust leak, you're sucking exhaust in the cabin. Another day. The big part about this one is you have 6-degree air, okay? Or you have 30 or 40, whatever the temperature is. It's rushed across that hot muffler. It can only raise that temp of that air so high until it goes in the cabin and comes to you. So if you've got 30-degree air comes in, and let's just say it has the capability of 30-degree air to raise the temperature to 60 as it goes across it, so your heat's pushing 60-degree temp air in there. But the cabin, it's drafty, it's gonna have cold air. So you got 60-degree mixing with 6-degree, trying to bring it up. But a 30-degree mixing with 30, in this aspect, it was a 30-degree outside air. So let's take 6 degrees. The problem is, you take 60-degree air, yeah, it's getting heated by that muffler, but only to maybe 35 or 40, maybe 50 degrees. If you're lucky, that's not heat anymore. It's not hot. It's heating the air, but the air's so cold, it can't bring it up. Now, your car, your house, you realize that the house recirculates. Like, if you let your house get to 32 and you turn your heater on, you're only gonna have lukewarm air coming out of your furnace. You're gonna go, why is this broke? Why is it not heating very well? That's because it's taken the 32 or 40-degree air in the house and trying to heat it. House heat works well because you're recirculating. You're not pulling the freezing outside air and trying to heat it. You're taking your, at my house, my 68-degree air, and I'm heating it to, gosh, it's 100 plus coming through the furnace, so it heats very rapidly. Same with your car. You have the fresh air and recirculate. In the winter, if you're worried about your heat in your car not being great, turn it to recirculate, because then it's taking the already heated air and heating it more. So all heaters only have enough room to heat so much. So if you're able to use the air you've already heated to heat it again, it gets hotter and hotter. Now in the cabin of an airframe, you don't have that possibility. All you can do is heat the temp of the air coming in. So when it's out this cold, you are not gonna get heat in the cabin. Below 20 degrees, the heat blowing in the cabin is not gonna be near as warm. The air around the cabin is gonna make the cabin cold, and before you know it, you're freezing. So if it's 6 degrees out and we were to go fly right now, if you didn't have gear like this, your toes would go numb. Your fingers, you wouldn't be able to fly. You would lose the feeling of your fingers. So then again, you're having to bundle up, but then causes more issues. So from a flying aspect, you know, even if we were to preheat the engine and we had a great heater, from the flying aspect, you're still looking at pretty much navigation as your only thing. You're not gonna be powering down, powering up. Slow flight, stalls, pattern work, all of that is dangerous to this piece of machinery right here in these temps. Now, could I take, and there's people out there flying, yeah, we could take off, we could go some places, but we're looking at the possibility of prolonged, you know, bad compression, bad things, oil not warming up. There's a lot of issues there. You gotta watch your descents. So could it be done? Yes. We pick and choose as the temperatures raise, and it gets in the, you know, gets higher. We'll talk with the instructors and maybe some renters that have some trips and talk about what things could be doing, risk versus reward. I'm gonna tell you, if we had 3 months of this, the risk versus reward would be, hey, we need to fly and not be down for 3 months. When we're losing a week here or there, the risk of causing $30,000 to $50,000 worth of damage isn't worth just taking a week because it got cold. So we're gonna be watching that environment. Yes, temperatures come up in the 30s, we're flying. But we're gonna be talking about how cold is it in that morning for preheating. So we'll be working that out. Your instructors will be working with me. If you're a renter, you need to work with me. If you're seeing any temperatures in the morning below 20 degrees, even the starts are gonna be a problem. We're not just pulling these things out and starting it, even though it's gonna be 30 or 40 degrees. So just things to watch out. Thank you for your time. Thanks for watching the video, and hopefully you learned a little bit and understand where we're coming from. And if you ever do get your own plane, how you can keep your costs down through the winter.